Win big in 2024 with Team Sync from Roto-Baller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the live draft assistant, free agent finder, and lineup optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code Knuckler. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code ROTOBRADY. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got free contests, paid contests coming to a state near you, and they're giving out boosts and slashing lines all day long. Check it out. It's a fun platform. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 141 of Rotoballer's official MMA podcast. Tap that. We got UFC 303 this weekend taking place at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. We got plenty of MMA too. PFL Invicta is going to be on CBS Sports Network. Big boxing events. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady for picks on all of that business. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. Come out to the Rotoballer MMA Discord on Saturday. Let's talk about this card as it's happening from a DFS and a betting perspective, whatever it may be. And check out my new weekly MMA DFS value plays articles on Rotoballer. With me tonight to discuss UFC 303 and so much that went into it, into the formation of the card, frequent guest co-host on this show. Give it up for Connor Bones Sloan. Connor, how's it going?
What's up, man? Going pretty well. Thanks for having me on again.
So let's talk about last week real quick. Doesn't the world make so much more sense when you see, like, when a fight ends like Robert Whittaker did? Like,
yeah,
isn't
absolutely.
Robert Whittaker still just as good as we thought he is?
Yeah, that was a great fight. It was really quick. Definitely felt good to see Whitaker get such a signature win like that. I definitely think Ikram is still a good fighter. I think he has a high ceiling. I mean, he got caught by a very elite fighter on short notice, so that happens. So definitely no hate to Ikram. Glad he stepped in on short notice, but man, it's always good to see Whitaker get such a win like that.
And it's just been so long since anybody who was not a champion or a former champion or not former, a future champion has beaten Robert Whittaker. And so when you see him at like what he probably went off at like minus 155 over the weekend, which is just crazy. And I know you saw the video that was breaking down how quickly Robert Whittaker was getting the reads on what Ikram was doing with his kicks. So it was like, it was just so quick and devastating. You feel for Ikram because he stepped in and into a main event for a huge huge event that they were putting on. So that was awesome. And he's gonna get other bigger fights. I don't think anybody can blame him too hard for losing to Robert Whittaker under those circumstances.
Yeah, like I said, you get caught sometimes. Best fighters in the world get caught every once in a while. Happened to Ikram, but I think he'll be back, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here at least.
Also the co-main event, you hit the nail on the head with that. This was going to a decision, but it's weird because it's like for different reasons than we discussed, because it ends up like it seems like these two have very serious beef between them as opposed to like being reluctant, teammates or friends fighting. And Sergey even shoved Volkov after the fight, after it was over, and Volkov just pieced him up the entire time, moving backwards even. He got better as the fight was going on. Sergey never really threatened Volkov with a serious shot. He hit him with some good punches, but Volkov was never in any real danger.
Yeah, that was a very impressive performance from Volkov. He just absolutely pieced him up, and I definitely kind of similar to just talking about Ikram. I don't think Pavlovich is going away. I think he's what is he 26? That's a fight that he'll learn from. He'll come back. I think he still has a high ceiling as well, but But man, Volkov just looked like the veteran in there. He looked like he used his range really well. He's like he's like if Stefan Struve had a jab. That's what he reminds me of. Great. Yeah, I didn't pick the correct winner, but I'm proud of myself for that decision pick. I wonder what the odds were on just betting it going the distance.
Yeah, I don't know. And Volkov now is number 3 in the heavyweight rankings, which is like, what does that even do for him? With everything that's been going on at the top of heavyweight, it's like, what is being number 3? What's the difference between like number 3 and number 6? Like, you're just going to be fighting a combination of each other. It's not like there's going to be 2 or 3 title opportunities for these guys for the rest of 2024. So it's a weird spot for Volkov to be in. But good for him because he's put himself in as good a position as possible moving forward for this stage in his career.
Yeah, and this might be a hot take. I think I told you this, and I'm sure people are going to disagree. But just theoretical matchup in some world, if Volkov ends up fighting John Jones, I think he pieces him up on the feet. If he can stop the takedown, I think he would win. But as you pointed out, I don't think he would be able to stop John Jones' takedown. But it's a fun matchup to think about at least.
Oh, I forgot that you mentioned that too. Yeah, no, it's fun to think, and it's cool that Volkov has hung around this long. He's always been like so tough, and it's like he went from being like looking like Stefan Struve at one point, and then like when he fought Overeem, he looked like a tank. So
Yeah.
it's been really impressive, like how he's been able to hang around this rung of competition for so long when a lot of guys that occupied those rankings at the same time are now finding themselves on the wrong side of a lot of fights because they're getting older. But Volkov's style kind of conducive to being able to fight for a little bit longer. Uh,
And the thing that you gotta wonder, we should probably spend too long on this one, but I mean, when you're number 3 in the UFC, you're on a nice win streak. Would you consider going to PFL and trying to win the million? I'm sure if he did, he'd get paid more than he's getting paid right now. So just something to think about. I think he definitely could win the PFL heavyweight tournament. I do think their current heavyweight champ is a good fighter, but I doubt he's as elite as Volkov is.
yeah, regardless of organization, because it's different once you go to lighter weight classes. But when you're
Mhm.
talking about heavyweight for Volkov, when you're number 3 ranked in the UFC in the world right now, I believe that he is the number 3 heavyweight in the world.
Yeah.
Or number 4, however they kind of like work that out between like the champions, and then they rank them 1, 2, 3. So I don't know exactly. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I guess this wasn't a PFL, but if Ryan Bader is a champ of your division, then your division's a bit shallow.
and so, do UFC 303 this weekend. This was originally supposed to be a card with fights between Jamal Hill and Cleo Roundtree. Then that didn't happen. Then Jamal Hill and Carlos Oldberg. Then Jamal Hill's out. Anthony Smith versus Carlos Oldberg. Oldberg withdrew. And most famously, the fight we've been waiting, really like years for, that it doesn't seem that long, but how quickly but it must have dragged on for Michael Chandler because Conor McGregor breaks his toe. There's been a lot of discussion about that. But Conor pulls out, which I don't think he's ever done before, and they're saying they're going to reschedule the fight for soon. And I I see why Conor pulls out of that fight. Because fighting injured has not worked out for him. Over the last few fights. So I don't blame it, and I do think like whether it's super authentic or not, he said that like it's got to disappoint a lot of his fan base when he goes in and fights injured and there's such a bad result. So I get it.
Yeah, I think under normal circumstances, I would agree with you. I'd say I get it. You shouldn't go in as a compromised fighter, but we're talking about the guy that gave RDA so much shit for not fighting with a broken foot.
That is also
So
true.
yeah, so I guess it's a little bit of karma for Connor.
Yeah, he can always turn that around though. But Connor, what we end up with as a main event is so much better. And it's the only 2 dudes batshit crazy enough in the world to say to agree to meet up at a big pay-per-view event, come in and save it fighting for the title in what is an incredibly close matchup, and between really two of my favorite personalities in all of the UFC. Like some of the funny dude. All right, so anyway, folks, we got a main event for the light heavyweight championship between Alex Pereira and Jiri Prochazka. Jiri has politely and respectfully asked Alex Pereira not to use shaman magic in this fight. And I love all the things where people were saying, like, if this was anybody but Jiri saying this, I'd be like, that's crazy. But when Jiri says it, it's like, oh yeah, man, like, but you should probably try to get rid of that magic. How do you feel about this main event? Like, or what was your reaction, in excitement level when this was announced?
Yeah, I mean, this is an amazing main event. I knew it was a rematch that was pretty much inevitable to happen, especially after both of their last two fights. And I'm super pumped. Like, sure, I will admit it would have been cool to see Conor make a return, especially against a fighter like Chandler. But this is just as good, if not better. I mean, these two are in their prime. They're crazy. They both are very exciting. I mean, it's entirely possible that McGregor versus Chandler, they go out there, they have a blowout of a first round, and they both completely gas. This fight will not be like that. I think this fight is guaranteed fireworks. It's an awesome rematch, and I'm excited to see how Jiri can kind of adjust his game and maybe be a little bit more safe, but obviously just as aggressive. And I'm excited to see Pereira, walk out with his demons, and the shadow people are gonna get him and Jiri. I think I saw someone comment this on Reddit, so I can't take credit for it, but Jiri obviously needs Jared Cannonier and his crystals in his corner.
So we got Jiri as the plus 124 underdog, Pereira the minus 148 favorite. Pereira on that 3-fight winning streak since he lost to Israel Adesanya in April of 2023. He's remained super active, gets that decision over Jan Blachowicz, knocks out Jiri back in November of last year, and is coming off an easy, devastating knockout over Jamal Hill April of this year. The legend continues to grow, and there's been the talk of him going up to heavyweight, whatever the hell that would look like at some point. But he's got the only guy that's beaten him in his time in the UFC is a guy that he historically owned over his professional career. And at light heavyweight, from the moment he beat Jan, he looked like the best light heavyweight in the world. Jiri, I love this guy. I love Jiri so much for the fights that he has given us. The knockout that he had over Dominic, over Volkan, and by the way, Johnny Walker really done after that Volkan loss. The submission over Glover, June of 2022, and one of the greatest light heavyweight fights that we've ever seen. The loss to Pereira, and then a second round knockout win April of this year against Alexander Rakic. Jiri is one of the most entertaining fighters to watch, but like frustrating too if you bet on him, because plus 124 is very reasonable. And he comes for it, and Pereira is the type of guy that does eat shots, if you come forward aggressively, and Jiri does. But the problem with Jiri is like he's just going to recklessly throw himself into those same situations. I don't see that being too different this time. I think it makes for what is going to be an incredible fight, but I don't see a whole lot of reason that it should go that much different. My biggest question is like Pereira by knockout or by decision. I think knockout is more likely because I think Jiri's going to give him those opportunities, and Pereira is just too surgical and too powerful. Pereira by knockout plus 110. I like that. I cannot knock Pereira minus 148, and I really can't knock Jiri plus 124 either.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting matchup, especially since it's such short notice. Honestly, I said this last time, so I don't know, maybe a little bit of bias, maybe a little bit of me wanting to eventually be correct, but I think Jiri has a good shot here. I think he overextended a lot on the shot that Pereira caught him with, and I do think the stoppage was a bit early. I'm not gonna say it was a bad stoppage. I don't think it was, but I do think Jiri could have recovered from that potentially. Obviously, Pereira is a very hard hitter. We don't know what would have happened, but Jiri's definitely been hurt pretty hard in the past and came back and found a way to win. So I mean, I kind of like Jiri as an underdog here. I think if he just does not overextend like he did in the first fight, it'll be a much more competitive fight for a little bit longer. I think it's going to be one of those stories where whichever guy catches the other guy first is going to win, and I think Jiri is going to use his length and find a nice shot. And Pereira, I don't know if I'd say he has a bad chin because he got knocked out at a weight that he cuts like 45 pounds to get to. But, from what we've seen, he can be caught and knocked out. So I think Jiri definitely has the power to do that.
Oh, I'm so excited for this main event. This is so awesome. Dude, Jiri really might be like my favorite fighter to watch in the UFC right now. Especially like I love him for his Ryzen background too. But so I think that both of these guys are very worthy plays in DFS. And if I'm gonna give a number, I think Pereira probably wins this like 55 to 60 times out of 100, but it could be, I mean, like, I see grounds for this being, if this would have been Pick'em, it wouldn't have shocked me. But Connor, on this fight, I've really struggled to come up with a projection for the co-main event at featherweight. Brian T. City Ortega, the plus 120 underdog against Diego Lopez, the minus 142 favorite. Diego Lopez on a 3-fight winning streak, including 3 finishes after losing 2 in a row coming into the UFC against Anderson Brito and Movsar Evloev. 3 wins against Gavin Tucker, Pat Sabatini, and Sadiq Youssef. That's his best win of Sadiq Youssef, April of 2024. Brian Ortega, winner of 2 of his last 4. Includes losses to Volkanovski, who, I mean, just had his number as bad as Max Holloway did. A knockout loss to Yair Rodriguez in what was the shoulder injury, and then he comes back and finishes Yair Rodriguez February of this year, despite getting knocked down. He ends up getting the arm triangle. And the win before that, you have to go all the way back to October of 2020 against the Korean Zombie. This is an ultimate combination of a dude who has fought monsters and been at the top for a while in Ortega, but the results of late have been questionable. And a guy like Diego Lopez, who has looked like a killer, but we just haven't seen a sample size against that top tier level of competition that's above Sadiq Youssef. If I'm inclined to go with anything, I think that this is a really big jump for Diego Lopez, and he looked fantastic, but you can't make any mistakes against Brian Ortega. And that is something that Octagon experience really helps you out in, is knowing what situations to not put yourself in against Brian Ortega. So I think plus 120 is a good number. I think this is about a 50-50 matchup, all things considered. I think that, like, I just think that for who we've seen Brian Ortega lose to, I think he is just well-rounded enough to be able to withstand how, explosive and dangerous Diego Lopez is. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's an amazing fight. I'm super pumped for this one, but I think I'm going to disagree with you on this one just a little bit. I think Lopez is going to win. I think it's going to be a close, competitive fight, but I think Lopez has good enough jujitsu to be able to not put himself in a position to get subbed, at the very least. And I don't think Ortega doesn't have great takedown ability. He definitely is amazing on the ground, but I don't think he's one of those guys that can go out there and slam double legs 10 times around. And I think Lopez is just going to be faster on the feet. I think this one's going to come down to speed. I think Lopez is accurate and has good boxing. I think he's just going to piece Brian Ortega up a little bit. I think Brian has an amazing chin, so I would go Lopez by decision. I think Ortega is definitely going to get some shots in, some big shots, and it'll be a good fight. But I think Lopez on this one.
And this has been dubbed the people's main event. And at light heavyweight, poor Anthony Smith, the plus 124 underdog, fighting Roman Dolidze, stepping in on real late notice, who is the minus 148 favorite. Anthony Smith somehow is coming off a win against Vitor Petrino. And I'm a guy, I never dump on Anthony Smith. It's just like when I say poor Anthony Smith, I mean just like the way the internet treats him. Now, he did a lot of that to himself in how he talks about the rest of the light heavyweight division. 2 wins out of his last 5. Ryan Spann by split decision, and Vitor Petrino. Losses to Magomed Ankalaev, Johnny Walker, and Khalil Roundtree Jr. in the process. Khalil Roundtree Jr. put him on another planet. Roman Dolidze. They were both born in 1988, crazily enough. He is the loser of 2 in a row, both by decision, against Nasruddin Imavov and Marvin Vettori. Most recent win, December of 2022, against Jack Hermanson by second-round knockout. He was on a 4-fight winning streak at that point, which also included wins over Phil Hawes and Kyle Dawkins by knockout and a decision over Laureano Staropoli. This is a tough one, and it's happening at light heavyweight, and that does change things.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to decide if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing for Dolidze. His cardio against Imavov looked absolutely terrible, so maybe not cutting as much weight, maybe he'll be much more nimble and have really good cardio. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think that if you're able to win a fight by knockout and you've had wins against good fighters, and I think that Roman is going to be a step quick. He's taken less damage, over the last few years. I think that if you could see a guy knocking Anthony Smith out at this point, I think you kind of have to go in that direction. So I think that Roman wins this fight maybe like 55 times out of 100. So minus 148, I think, is on the border. Dolidze by knockout is plus 215. I also think that you could go Anthony Smith by decision. I think would be most reasonable. I don't think that is, I don't think that that's crazy either. And that's plus 350.
Yeah, I think now that I had a little bit to think about it while you were talking, I think I'm gonna go Dolidze. And just thinking back to Anthony Smith, his last win, it was against it was a good win against a very very talented up and comer, but he caught him in a sub really early. I think if that fight went on longer, he was gonna get messed up. And I mean, his loss to Johnny Walker is aging pretty poorly right now. So I think Dolidze is just going to be, like you said, a step ahead, maybe a step quicker, a step fresher. I like him by decision because Smith is, he got knocked out against Khalil Roundtree, but Khalil Roundtree is just an animal. I think Smith is a tough guy. He's proven that many times in the past. So I see Dolidze pulling out a decision here.
What an interesting career that Anthony Smith has had.
If he fights 2 more times, he's had 60 mixed martial arts fights, which is crazy.
And especially considering how like he got brutalized in that stretch of like John Jones and Glover, the way he just got like the shit beat out of him, like Edmund Shabazian style, and is still fighting. And every time you think like it, so I'll give him that credit. Like he's had a very interesting career, and to have that kind of longevity and that many fights is a whole different thing.
I think if Anthony does get a win, it'll be by sub. What are the odds on that one?
Let's see here. Anthony by submission plus 700.
Yeah, I mean, if you're feeling frisky, if you think Anthony Smith is going to win, definitely put it on him by submission. If you did that against Petrino, you'd be very rich right now.
And people have been betting on Anthony Smith because Roman Dolidze started off as the minus 170 favorite.
Yeah, I don't know. I might throw a few bucks on Smith by sub.
And Diego Lopez, by that man, he started off as the plus 105 underdog against Brian Ortega. That's how quickly it moved when he was the underdog. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Next up, we got a women's bantamweight matchup between Mayra Bueno Silva and Macy Chiasson. Macy, the minus 108 underdog after being the plus 195 underdog. And now Mayra Bueno Silva is the minus 112 favorite. Wait, no. Minus 108 underdog. Mayra Bueno Silva, the minus 112 favorite. So Macy, for someone that people like to give a lot of shit to, I guess, Macy has won 4 of her last 6, dating back to February of 2020. Winner of 2 of her last 3 over Norma Dumont and Penny Kianzad. the only loss in that time was to Irene Aldana by third round knockout September of 2022. The activity level has not been there for Macy, but at least she fought March of this year. The other loss was to Raquel Pennington, so she's only had to fight tough fighters since she came into the UFC. And she's mostly won. She's only got 3 losses in that whole stretch since November of 2018. But Mayra Bueno Silva has not really had a win since Lena Landsberg, February of 2023. She had the no contest, the overturned guillotine against Holly Holm, July of 2023. And then she's coming off a loss to Raquel Pennington for the women's bantamweight championship. Her 3-fight winning streak before that was Yanan Wu, Stephanie Egger, and Lena Landsberg. And Connor, this is why I was on Raquel Pennington when she was matched up with Mayra Bueno Silva. You hear those 3 names. That is not, I mean, maybe for the women's bantamweight division, but that is not a winning streak that makes me think that somebody is the best in the world. And the Holly Holm submission, for whatever it's worth, for how, for what age Holly's at. But Mayra Bueno Silva got, pretty thoroughly dominated by Raquel Pennington in that fight January of this year. I'm way more impressed with what Macy has been up to over the last couple of years, even with how less active she's kind of been. Macy has the wins over the better opponents. I think that Macy is going to be able to. I think that she'll be able to avoid takedowns. And I think that her striking is going to be a lot more effective. I'm just not seeing a ton from Mayra Bueno Silva that I think is a whole, super effective against the top of this division. So I think Macy wins this fight 60 to 65 times out of 100. Hammer -108. And I guess by decision plus 165 is most reasonable. I think the person more likely to finish the fight is Mayra Bueno Silva. Inside the distance for her is plus 240. What do you think here?
Yeah, I think I agree with pretty much everything you said. Bueno Silva did not look good in her last fight, just whatsoever. Macy has not been as active, but I do think she's the better fighter here. I like her by decision. I don't think she's going to go out there and get a highlight reel knockout, even though that would be cool. Yeah, I like her by decision a lot.
And this isn't one where I'd go in the DFS direction for. I think there's a good case for the first 3 fights. But Connor, I think that's about all we need to say about MBS and Chiesa, because I'm too excited to talk about the fight that's next. Ian Machado Gary and Michael Venom Page. I am so glad we're getting this matchup. You could make an argument for this to be, you could make an argument for it to be a co-main event. I mean, maybe not on this card, but on almost any other card, it quite easily could be.
Absolutely.
Ian Gary, that cute video of his kid imitating Conor McGregor and such that came out this week. That's good PR for him. -155, the favorite. Michael Venom Page, the plus 130 underdog. Michael Venom Page said this week that if he was fighting Ian Gary outside of the UFC, people would still be saying he only fights cans, which is hilarious. Michael Venom Page. It's crazy that he only outstruck Kevin Holland 41-29 March of this year at UFC 299, because that decision felt way more dominant than that. Michael Venom Page, it felt like was landing everything that he wanted to at his pace, and it felt like Kevin Holland could just never get close. They had to come in flurries, but overall, it was a really good debut for Michael Venom Page, a guy that we've all loved watching in Bellator for a very long time. Hopefully you have. Ian Gary. Somebody Save Ian. Everybody check that out, because I've been singing it all week by Froggy Fresh. Coming off the win against Jeff Neal, 2 straight wins against Neil Magny, who he dominated, and Jeff Neal, who he beat by split decision. I thought Ian Gary won that fight, but I see how you could make the argument for Jeff Neal. You can always make the argument for Jeff Neal's the effectiveness of his strikes as opposed to Ian Gary's just being at higher volume. But Ian Gary, after these last 2 wins, it is, pretty confirmed that this dude's a pretty legit fighter. There was the questions after, even leading up to the D-Rod fight, because you see the way he finished Kenan Song, but he was very compromised in that fight against Kenan Song. We've seen Ian Gary in trouble. I think that this is a very interesting stylistic matchup. I love the mixture of Ireland versus England. I have to say, like, for Michael Venom Page being the underdog at plus 130, and that started off at minus 115, actually. I think it started off as pick'em. I think that this is a good number on Michael Venom Page. The effectiveness of the strike still comes through with MVP. He lands hard shots. It's just with a karate style that we're used to seeing more being touch and go and point style. Michael Venom Page, when he hits you, those shots do matter. And I think that Ian Gary could very easily, if Jeff Neal was landing as many shots that he did with the way that Ian Gary was entering in, I think that Ian Gary is going to put himself in danger. And MVP is a hard puzzle for anybody to figure out. So I think that this is about a 50-50 fight, honestly. I could see it go. This is going to be an exciting one to watch. There could only be 60 strikes landed in this fight, and it'd still be so exciting because you're going to be on the edge of your seat waiting to see what these exchanges are going to look like. But I like Michael Venom Page plus 130, and I like Page by decision plus 275. Gary by decision plus 140, I think is probably the best way to go for him too. Just because I think it's going to be very hard for him to finish Michael Venom Page, even when he gets close to him, because it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not something that he has done over the last two fights, at least. What do you think about this one? I know you've got a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I don't know. Maybe I'm blinded by bias on this one, but man, I'm taking Michael Venom Page all day, every day. This is probably my strongest pick on the card. I think Michael Page is going to make Gary just look silly, to be honest. I think, and that's not to say Gary is a bad fighter. I think he certainly proved that he is not a bad fighter, but his style, I think it works really well against guys like Jeff Neal, guys like Neil Magny, but I think it's not going to work with MVP at all. MVP is too fast for him. He's insanely fast. He's got some power. Gary's gotten dropped by Song Kinong before, like you said. I'm taking Michael Page all day. And I think another thing is Gary's mentality going into this one. So we all know that he basically just steals everything from Conor McGregor, does the Conor McGregor walk, says Conor McGregor lines after his wins, which I think is just incredibly stupid. Like, it's one thing to, really like McGregor and look up to him, especially since they're both Irish. Conor McGregor's biggest star in the sport. That I would understand. But he is just a copycat. Like, if he was a serial killer, he would just be a copycat. So, like I said, might be a blind bias on this one. I'm taking Michael Page by knockout every time. I think I'll probably just throw money on Page to win. But I'm feeling very confident in this one.
If Ian Gary was a serial killer, he'd be the Zodiac too, and he'd just copy all the letters that the Zodiac wrote to the police. No, but it's it's an interesting thing. It's almost clever because Ian Gary has found a way to be so hated by people that so many people know who he is, and it makes him like a big ticket fighter. It's kind of Muhammad. If you can't make them love you, make them hate you more than anything, and they will know your name. So it's very interesting. But might be the fight I'm the second most looking forward to on this card.
Yeah, I think one thing that you said reminded me of the quote, it's better to be infamous than not famous at all. So, Gary, he's definitely very hated. It was interesting to see the crowd so on MVP's side, especially after it was not like that with Holland, understandably. I'm interested to see how that affects MVP's mentality. It's hard to say that he'll fight any different because he showboats every time he fights, but I think that just makes it more fun. So I think I'm very excited for this one as well.
Hopefully we see Michael Venom Page pull a Pokeball out on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we see him crush Gary's skull in first, though.
Jesus Christ. I mean, he didn't do that to a person. So it's always a possibility. He's like he inflicted like construction accident like wounds on a person's head with his body in a fight that everybody was watching. So next up, we got a middleweight matchup between Joe Pyfer and Marc-Andre Barriault. Barriault, the plus 235 underdog. Joe Pyfer, the minus 290 favorite. That's on the move from Pyfer being minus 162 down to minus 290. MAB, winner of 2 of his last 3. However, that was against Julian Marquez by second round knockout and Eric Anders by unanimous decision. Marc-Andre Barriault, I like this. It's like you should pick this guy always as a slight favorite, but never as like a slight underdog or a moderate underdog. There's a certain level he hasn't been able to surpass. You know, he can beat the Dolces, the Abu Azatars, the Jordan Wrights, the Marquezes, and the Anders. Cannot beat the Cheaties, the Anthony Hernandezes, or the Action Man Curtises. That's his last fight, January of this year, getting outstruck 140 to 122 in a split decision win for the Action Man. So it was an admirable performance. But I think the narrative still stands. And then you got Joe Pyfer, body bag, 6 years younger. And he was on a 4-fight winning streak with 4 finishes, 3 knockouts, half of those being in the first round, the other 2 in the second. And he had wins over Gerald Mearshart, Alan Amedovski, Abdul Razak Al Hassan, the 3 most impressive. And then we are coming off him getting, pretty thoroughly beaten by Jack Hermanson in a fight that ended up 48-47 on all 3 judges' scorecards. I think this was a fight, if I recall, that Pyfer started strong in and then faded very quickly or faded, quick enough in that main event of the UFC fight night. And the rest was Hermanson's, and he got outstruck 121 to 92. This is a tough one. I do think that's still the wisest way to go. I think that this is now within reach, for Joe Pyfer. Jack Hermanson was a really hard ask. And people forget that about Hermanson, about how many of the best contenders at middleweight that he fought over the last few years. So I can't blame Pyfer too hard for that. Minus 290 seems a little crazy, just considering the win, just like the durability and the kind of consistency of Marc-Andre Barriault, and the fact that Pyfer is coming off of a loss where it kind of derailed a lot of the hype train. But he seems bothered by it, but fueled by it, and I like that. So I think that he's going to be looking to put Marc-Andre Barriault away in pretty devastating fashion. Pyfer inside the distance is plus 100. For being the minus 290 favorite. I think if you're going to go MAB, I think plus 235 is fine, because I do think minus 290 is kind of crazy for Pyfer. But I think plus 100 inside the distance is a no-brainer. And I think Pyfer is a very worthy DFS play this week. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think I agree with most of what you said. I think Pyfer is a very good fighter. I think he's one of those guys that is going to take a loss from Jack Hermanson and learn a lot from it. And he did clearly lose that fight, but he was doing really well in the first 2 rounds. He just faded in that 3rd, 4th, and 5th, which, it was his first 5-round fight, I think, unless he fought outside the UFC in a 5-round fight. So it's a little bit understandable. He's still young. I think this being a 3-round fight is really beneficial for him. He can manage his energy better over 15 minutes instead of 25. I do think the odds are a little bit crazy. Minus 290 is not what I would have expected. I do like Pyfer here. I like Pyfer inside the distance, just like you said. I think another thing to consider is Andre Barriault's last fight against Chris Curtis. And maybe it was because he was fighting Chris Curtis, but that was kind of at like a sparring pace. And, I thought it was a good fight. A lot of people did not think it was a good fight. I thought it was still entertaining, but they were clearly fighting at, that kind of sparring pace, which is something that a lot of guys struggle with if they spar incredibly frequently, like Sean Strickland or Chris Curtis or whoever spars that frequently. So I think the difference in mentality in this one, Joe Pyfer is going to come out ready to avenge a loss and ready to get another finish. And Andre Barriault's going to go out there, and if he fights the same way he did against Curtis, it's not going to go well for him. So I like Joe Pyfer a lot on this one. The odds, like I said, are a little bit crazy, but plus 100 isn't that bad for the finish.
No, and I like that reasoning. And this is another fight. The next one, a featherweight matchup between Cub Swanson, the plus 190 underdog, started off at plus 130 and it's on its way to plus 200. Andre Touchy-Feely Guy with the worst nickname in the UFC, bar none. He is still the reigning champion. He is the minus 230 favorite. Cub Swanson, the legend. Started his first fight in the WEC, Conor, was March 24th of 2007. This guy has fought all the best guys in the world at featherweight for damn near 2 decades at this point. Yeah, give it a few more years and pretty much 2 decades. And now, of all things, he was on that 4-fight losing streak that ended May of 2019 against Shane Burgos. But quietly, he has won 4 of his last 6 fights against Kron Gracie, Daniel Pineda, Darren Elkins, and Hakeem Dawodu. Now, the thing about those wins, Dawodu happened August of last year. That's his most recent fight. The most recent win after that, or before that, Darren Elkins, that's December of 2021. He's got losses to Giga Chikadze and Jonathan Martinez, both by knockout in between. But the Hakeem Dawodu fight is a real legitimizer, even still at this age, born in 1983, almost 41 years old. And he's fighting on this card. And again, we're talking about Cub Swanson having a chance to win. Andre Fili, winner of 2 of his last 7 fights. Against Bill Algeo by split decision, September of 2022, and by first-round knockout against Lucas Almeida, December of 2023. The losses in between to Bryce Mitchell, Yoanderson Brito, Nathaniel Wood, and he just got knocked out by Dan Ige February of this year. The losses were to good fighters, for sure. But only 2 wins dating back to June of 2020. For Andre Fili, for a guy that's been active, you would really hope that it's more. And there was the no contest against Daniel Pineda. So who knows exactly how that would have turned out. He was outstriking him 34-15. It seems crazy, Conor, to be leaning like that Cub Swanson can win this fight. But I think that Cub Swanson can win this fight. I think that Andre Fili and Cub Swanson are going to exchange, a good amount. I think there's going to probably be 130 to 170 combined strikes between the two. And I think it's going to go to decision probably. Now, either of them I think is capable of landing a big shot, but this feels like a fight that goes to the judges' scorecard. I think for Cub, it's a little bit similar to the Dawodu fight. I think if you do what you did against Hakeem Dawodu, you have every chance in the world to win this. So I think Cub maybe wins this fight 40 to 45 times out of 100. So I like my plus 190. I don't think you have to go with a method of victory. If I did for Cub, I would go by decision. And, for Fili, I think that I would actually go Fili by knockout just because Cub is almost 41 years old. And Cub's, last 2 losses have both been by knockout. And Fili by knockout is plus 150. What say you?
Yeah, this is a great matchup. I think there's definitely some value in Cub as that big of an underdog. But on the flip side, I think Andre Fili is the more likely to win. I like Fili by knockout specifically because Max Holloway said that Fili was one of the hardest hitters that he's ever faced, which is just a crazy statement considering who he's all fought and that he has such a granite chin. So I think if Fili wins, it's going to be a knockout. I think if Cub wins, it'll be by being more active and landing more strikes. So Cub by decision would probably be a good way to go. I don't know. I think I agree with you. I think this one's kind of a toss up. They're both veterans in their own right. They're both good strikers. They're both quick. I think it's a tough matchup. So, maybe just go for the underdog on a fight like this, or go for method of victory with Fili by knockout. But yeah, I think most likely Fili by knockout. But man, it's a close one.
And so next up, we got another featherweight matchup between Charles Jourdain, Air Jourdain, the minus 118 favorite, and Gene Silva, the minus 102, very, very slight underdog. Silva, winner of 2 at the UFC level, counting the Contender Series, a unanimous decision win over Kevin Vallejos on the Contender Series, and then a first-round knockout against Weston Wilson. Charles Jourdain, winner of 2 of his last 3, dating back to May of 2023, a unanimous decision win over Kron Gracie, and a guillotine against Ricardo Ramos. He is coming off a split decision loss to Sean Woodson in a fight that wasn't this the one where Bruce Buffer said Sean Woodson won, but Charles Jourdain for some reason thought he said Sean Woodson, and they were both celebrating.
That sounds familiar. I can't remember if it was this fight, but it certainly could have been.
And to go back even further, I think that Charles Jourdain's resume should look even more impressive because I thought he beat Shane Burgos back in July of 2022. And it's so hard to outstrike someone 113-42 and lose by majority decision. But that was a fight where I did think Charles Jourdain won. So I think that Charles Jourdain's resume is more impressive than the win-loss record. And Gene Silva, if I had my "you cannot do this" Joanna drop, I would do it right now because, impressive win over Weston Wilson. But this is just not nearly enough for me to say that this dude should be so closely handicapped against Charles Jourdain. Jourdain started off as the -198 favorite. And so people must have been betting a lot of Silva. I believe in Charles Jourdain's chance to beat a lot of fighters at a certain level. You see that from how close the Woodson loss and the Burgos loss were. Nathaniel Wood wasn't able to put him away, and he's won 2 of his last 3 against savvy veterans in Kron Gracie and Ricardo Ramos. I think Charles Jourdain wins this fight 70 times out of 100. So give me Jourdain straight up -118, and I think that's probably the best value that you're going to get. By decision plus 180, sure. And I think it's proven very hard to finish Charles Jourdain. So I think if you're going Silva, I think you go by decision plus 275.
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup. I don't know as much about Silva as I feel like I should to confidently make a really good pick here. I'll need to go rewatch his Weston Wilson fight. But I think I agree with you. I think Jourdain is a crafty veteran. And I think against competition of this level or guys that have the experience levels, and especially in the UFC as Silva, I think he has a very good chance to win those. I like him by decision. Him straight up is a great option because he's so closely handicapped. But yeah, I'm taking Jourdain in this one. He's also had some exciting fights, so I'm interested to see how this one goes.
And he was going to fight William Gomez back in May, but that fight got canceled. And Connor, just a little bit more background. He came in via Spartacus MMA. It wasn't like he was a champion there or anything, at least from what I'm seeing on Tapology. Combined record of his last 2 opponents before he was on the Contender Series was 13-9. So it's just not the kind of dude that I would think coming in you would have so close against Charles Jourdain. It's not that type of talent to me.
Yeah, I think in this one, Jourdain's experience is going to really, really help him in there. So I think that's a huge factor to consider.
And speaking, Connor, of that type of talent, next up we got a bantamweight matchup between Peyton Talbot, the -1600 favorite, against Yanni Gamori, the +900 underdog. Peyton Talbot, he made that video breaking down how to beat him for his opponent. He's a weird dude, but I like him. I think, and everybody this is that fight against Cameron Simon was an awesome display against another guy that I consider still to be a young and rising talent in Simon. But he just looked fantastic in that fight. -1600 seems a little crazy. He started off at -298 and it's moved its way to -1600. So
Man, I wish we would have got in at -298.
Yeah, Gamori, 29 years old, lost his UFC debut to William Gomez by 3rd-round knockout. Came in from Brave CF. That is a respectable organization for sure. This dude used to be a featherweight. That means, he is a little bit bigger. I see that. I respect UAE Warriors and Brave CF. And Talbot, before the Cameron Simon win, it was very reasonable to say, all right, let's see what this dude's made of. And after the Simon win, it's all right, this dude is very real. We have seen what this guy is currently made of. He's very good. And that's a great thing for Uriah Faber's A1 Combat, too, to have a guy like Talbot that is gaining so much notoriety. I think that Peyton Talbot by knockout minus 150 is the way to go. I think you want Talbot in DFS. I just like Gamori, I think is good, but like not better than William Gomez. That's going to be a problem against Peyton Talbot. So Talbot minus 150 by knockout, I think that is an obvious play. It's as obvious I can see on this card.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I do think the straight up odds are a little bit crazy considering, Talbot's so young in his career, but I'm not gonna say I don't understand it. He has been very, very impressive. I think he gets a win here. I like minus 150 for him by knockout. I would go with that all day.
Wouldn't it be amazing if Yanni followed the game plan that Peyton Talbot laid out to a T and it ended up getting, or if Peyton Talbot is pulling espionage and he actually gave him the opposite way to beat him, or he's preparing for the opposite. That'd be sinister. But everybody's looking forward to watching Peyton Talbot this weekend. So we're either going to see a really crazy upset and a hype derailment, but in all likelihood, we'll probably see another reason to believe that Peyton Talbot is a future contender at bantamweight. Next up, love that this one's happening. We got a women's strawweight matchup between the karate hottie and former bully beatdown contestant Michelle Waterson Gomez. She's taking on Jillian Robertson. Robertson is the minus 185 favorite. Michelle, the plus 154 underdog. Michelle, loser of 4 in a row. Okay. That's rough. Her last win was September of 2020 against Angela Hill. Losses in that time to Marina Rodriguez, Amanda Lemos, Luana Pinheiro by split decision, and then Marina Rodriguez again. She got finished twice in that stretch. The other 2 went to decision. So, and it's been 1 win since March of 2019. But again, the fighters that she's faced, Joanna, Carla, Marina twice, Amanda Lemos, and Luana. So it's been a rough run for her. But I mean, Michelle Waterson Gomez, born in 1986, it's felt like every fight over the last handful, it could have been a retirement fight for her. And we were kind of like waiting for it, and it keeps not happening. She wants to keep fighting, and that's fine because I really want to see her win another one. But then we got Jillian Robertson, winner of 3 of her last 4, with submissions over Maria Agapova and Piera Rodriguez in a second-round knockout over Poliana Viana. She has a decision loss to Tabitha Ritchie in the meantime, getting outstruck 100-76, taken down 3 times to 1. Connor, I don't see any reason why I really can go with. All right. Obviously, if you're going with Michelle Waterson, how does she win any fight? Usually by like successfully executing her stand up and landing a lot of volume, keeping you at a distance, and it might be a close decision. It usually tends to be, and that's what the last win against Angela Hill was. But do I think that if Jillian Robertson gets Michelle down to the ground, do I think Michelle's getting up for the rest of the round? Probably not at this point. I think Jillian's strikes are going to be meaningful when she does hit Michelle with them. And I think that like Michelle by decision, I think is still a really reasonable method of victory. But otherwise, I think I might end up saying like the right move is Jillian inside the distance. I think she's the better DFS play by far. But Jillian inside the distance, that's plus 180. I do think that Jillian probably wins this fight like 65 to 70 times out of 100. And it kills me to say it.
Yeah, as much as I love the karate hottie, she's had a very long career. She's given us some fun fights, some fun moments. She's 38. I think she's kind of out of her. She's clearly out of her prime. I don't think she's going to be able to channel it one last time like Rockhold did against Paulo Costa. I like Robertson here. I like her by decision, actually. What are the odds on that?
Robertson by decision plus 180.
Yeah, I'm taking that all day.
It's actually the same as Inside the Distance. That's crazy. Yeah. So, but no matter what I think is going to happen in this fight, I will be rooting for Michelle Waterson, even if it is against my best financial interest. You want to talk about Arlovsky and Bidet before you go?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. As I said, we have a heavyweight matchup and speaking of longevity, between Andre Arlovsky and Martin Bidet. Arlovsky, the plus 220 underdog. Bidet, the minus 270 favorite. Arlovsky has lost 3 in a row. Now, that was to Marcus Rogerio de Lima, Don'Tale Mayes, and Waldo Cortez Acosta. And the crazy thing about the Waldo fight, because he got finished by Don'Tale and Marcus Rogerio de Lima. But the Waldo fight, he actually lands more strikes, 58-49. And it was a fight where Waldo was not really winning it by that wide of a margin. Not a wide margin at all. But Waldo was still doing his thing, like he was dominating. Like he was like, I guess the word is showboating. But it's like you don't like to see it when like the fight's close and it's like, yes, I'm winning this. And it's like, maybe I would keep fighting if I were you. But the point of that is, before that 3-fight losing streak, this dude born in 1979, whose first fight in the UFC was November of 2000. November of 2000. He's like the Vince Carter of the UFC. And Andre Arlovsky was on a 4-fight winning streak from April of 2021 to April of 2022. The guys remained super active for a 40-plus-year-old heavyweight. And those wins were against Chase Sherman, Carlos Felipe, Jared Vandera, and Jake Collier. Martin Bidet, kind of, his best wins are against a similar level of fighter. He started off with 5 straight wins, including the Contender Series, wins over Lorenzo Hood, Chris Barnett, and this started a streak of 3 straight decisions. Lucas Bresky, that doesn't matter to me at all, really. Jake Collier, okay. Josh Parisian, first-round Kimura, little bit better. And then this is a guy that I liked as an underdog against Shamil Gaziev, and that was very, very, very wrong. And that ages not well, considering how Shamil Gaziev did against Jairzinho Rosenstruck. So Bidet is a guy that I do like against a certain level of competition, like against the Parisians, the Colliers, the Breskis, when he's just a mild favorite or whatever he was at the time. I think that he ends up being great value. And the Chris Barnett win was a good one too. But Andre Arlovsky at plus 220, after that fight with Waldo, this being a big UFC pay-per-view that he's on, you only have to go back 2 years to find his last win in the UFC. That's not a bad losing streak for a dude that's this old and has fought the guys that he has. It's been a lot of times where he was the underdog, and like he is now. Arlovsky at plus 220, and it's been kind of constant. I think that's where it started off at, around there. I think Andre Arlovsky wins this fight 50 times out of 100. Plus 220, give it to me all day. And I think for both of these guys, I think probably the more likely of the two to finish the fight inside the distance is Bidet, but Arlovsky by decision, plus 330, hammer it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree completely. I think this is one of those heavyweight examples where Andre Arlovsky obviously has a lot of experience and he's really good at managing his gas tank. I think if he gets out of the first round, I think he wins it by decision. Bidet he hasn't really impressed me that much in the past. I like Arlovsky by decision here, especially at those odds.
And I can't believe that this is a card where it started off with a Ricky Simone fight. But Connor, I'll let you get out of here. Thanks for joining us on Tap That Again, and looking forward to watching these fights and talking about them with you in real time.
Yep. Thanks, Brady.
Peace. Folks, we got a flyweight matchup now between Ray Saruya and Carlos Hernandez. Saruya, the minus 470 favorite. Hernandez, the plus 360 underdog. Hernandez, loser of 2 of his last 3. Both inside the distance. Granted to Alan Nascimento by rear naked choke, and to Tatsuro Taira by second round knockout, a guy that looks like he could be fighting for a title very, very soon. In between, he's got wins over Victor Altamirano by split decision, outstriking him 84-79 with 2 takedowns to 1. And a win against Dennis Bondar by unanimous decision, June of last year. outstriking him 102-76. They each had 2 takedowns. It was a very impressive win for Carlos Hernandez, though, against Dennis Bondar. And I think that was a fight that was very closely handicapped. Ray, winner of 3 in a row on the road to UFC. That requires prefacing. All right. 2 finishes, a submission against Renal Sayahan, a first-round knockout of Virginia Yushiu. God, that could be a really wrong pronunciation, but I think that, and that was February of this year. And that was a first-round knockout very early. I think like 1 second was left in the round when that finished. But then a unanimous decision against Mark Klimico, where he got 8 takedowns. That's how he ended up winning that one after getting knocked down, and there only being 54 strikes combined in that one. Yeah, here's the thing on this one. Plus 360 seems insane. I like Ray Saruya. I like the road to UFC guys in general. He started off at plus 285, but the wins against Victor Altamirano and Dennis Bondar are meaningful, especially against a guy that we haven't seen make a real UFC debut outside of road to UFC. It seems like a weird one to be so widely handicapped. But I gotta give credit to the guy in Hernandez. So your losses are to Nascimento and Tatsuro Taira. We don't know if that's where Ray Saruya is at right now after just, his 3 wins being in road to UFC. And the Bondar wins and the Altamirano, that gives me enough faith to think that Carlos Hernandez, even giving the credit to the upward trajectory of Saruya, I think Hernandez can win this fight 40 to 45 times out of 100. Plus 360, hit it. Hope that sound effect worked. I know we are on Zoom. So that one, of all the crazy favorites on this card that I agree with, this is the one where I'm very questionable about that minus 470 for Ray. And now we are to the first fight of the evening. This is the last fight. It's a 13-fight card. Ricky Simón against Vinicius Oliveira. Ricky Simón, the minus 250 favorite. Oliveira, the plus 205 underdog. Oliveira, winner of 2 in a row at the UFC level, counting the Contender Series. 2 knockouts against Victor Madrigal, September of 2023, and a flying knee finish over Bernardo Sopaj, March of this year, outstriking him 2 on the way. 67-45. He did get taken down 3 times. He got 2 takedowns. But that was a very impressive performance. Born in 1995, by the way. Ricky Simón, born August in 1992, coming off of 2 straight losses to Song Yadong by 5th round knockout and by unanimous decision to Mario Batista. Wins before that, it was a 5-fight winning streak against Ray Borg, Gaetano Perello, Brian Kelleher, Rafael Asuncao, and Jack Shore. His last win is now July of 2022. And that loss to Batista really kind of came out of nowhere, I guess. Batista hadn't really, the best win that he had up to that point was either Miles Johns or Brian Kelleher. So it was surprising that Batista rose to that occasion and was able to get that win over Ricky Simón and outstrike him by almost 70 strikes. This is a tough one. I'd have to be giving a lot of credit to Vinicius Oliveira to say that he comes in and wins this by knockout. I don't think Ricky Simón has fallen that far, and I think that it's going to be a lot easier to beat a guy like Ricky Simón if you can hit him hard, if that's your strength. Because I don't know if he's going to be able to outpace Ricky. So Ricky Simón is just a hard fighter to keep up with, even if the striking volume and the statistical output isn't always there. And the fights and the wars that Ricky Simón has been in, the opponents that he's faced, is going to be a big deal when you're fighting a guy who's young and new to the UFC, and his best win is Bernardo Sopaj. So I do think that I got to go Ricky Simón. I don't know. Let's see too what Oliveira, who's 20-3 as a pro, 28 years old. His losses are all inside the distance. And so I don't know. They're all by knockout, but Ricky Simón is of a great skill level, and I think that Oliveira is going to put himself in some bad positions. and Ricky Simone is very crafty. And so on Ricky Simone's craftiness, I think that he probably wins this fight like 70 to 75 times out of 100. Minus 250, I think, is it's a fair number. I do not like that minus 250 for parlay reasons, just because of the losing streak that Simone is on. But I would go Simone inside the distance, plus 140. And then I think the next best prop is plus 175 for Simone by decision. Oliveira by TKO knockout, that's plus 400. That might be the single most easy method of victory to sort out. So this is one that I really don't feel too good about betting on either way. Folks, that is it for episode 141 of Roto Bowler's official MMA podcast. Tap that. We were talking about UFC 303. There's a lot of MMA and boxing this week. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. That's where I make picks for all of that business. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Come out to the Roto Bowler MMA Discord on Saturday. Let's talk about this card as it's happening. Check out my MMA DFS value picks articles coming out on Roto Bowler on Fridays as well. Folks, thank you so much for listening. We got another weekend of spectacular fights to look forward to. Enjoy it. Peace.